Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Geek and Dorks Reviews. I picked a Netflix film for this week, and it's one that it's not quite a murder mystery, but I know that we've covered a lot of stories about police operations, and this one is called Killing Them Safely. And it is essentially the story of Taser International, the company that makes tasers. Here is the plot summary from IMDB. In the early 2000s, two brothers found tremendous success when their company began selling a device that has been called the biggest revolution in law enforcement since the radio. But as their company grew, they made decisions that would have lasting impact on both the public and their increasingly skeptical customer base. Sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? The plot summary might be a little better written than the film actually is. It's weird because I don't think this is a movie for everyone. I know a lot of you out there love mystery documentaries. That's kind of what I try to cover a bit more of on this show. But I was really interested in this topic. If you look at the early editions of Brain Scratch, I did one specifically. It was called Set Police Guns to Stun, and was talking about why firearm technology has not had any serious evolution in terms of it getting smarter. Basically, bullets are just as dumb as they ever have been. And Taser kind of stepped in and really gave law enforcement a bit of a different tool to use rather than drawing their guns or even using their nightsticks, which can inflict some serious long-term injury. And this documentary, at first, for the first 15 or 20 minutes, you feel like, oh wow, this is just going to tell you the story of Taser and how they're trying to change the world and hopefully save lives while they're protecting police officers, which is a very good focus for a company to have. I'm pretty sure that any company that spends considerable money in their product with that as their focus is going to be successful because it is a good-natured focus. You want them to have people be safe and protect the officers and still be able to control people. And there was some good aspects in terms of seeing the backstory of Taser, how the device came to be, how they kind of ramped it up so that it was more effective, and then that's really when the popularity of it sprang. But then it's weird. In terms of a film, I don't feel like the director had a very good grasp on this topic. I don't feel like he's quite showing us both sides. It just kind of meanders. And in terms of it being a film, if you're looking at it for entertainment value, it's not great. But in terms of an information piece, like if you consider it as being some type of long news segment or something like that, there's a bit more value in it there. You will definitely learn something about how this device came about how it's used, and then about how it gets potentially abused. And there is an effect that happens. I noticed it when I was doing my big cross-country drive. I was relying so much on Waze, the application that gives you driving directions, that when I ran into a problem with Waze, I was pretty much screwed. Like there were certain areas where I couldn't get an internet signal, and Waze couldn't get updated to give me or to continue the map that I was on. And in one particular case, Waze wanted me to take a highway that was under construction. And because I was just following the instructions of Waze, I wasn't really looking at the detour signs that were coming up that basically gave me all the information I needed to get around that construction. There is this thing with us as humans that when we start relying on a technology, we consider it the go-to. And that point is raised, not super eloquently, but it is raised in this film about are police officers going to tasers too quick? And they mentioned some very specific cases, an elderly woman that gets tased, a young child that gets tased. And then they go into some cases where people are getting tased and they're dying. And that is probably where the film gets its most interesting. Unfortunately, that's pretty much just the last third of the film. And even in that case, they bring in experts that are very weighted on either side of that equation. They didn't really reach out to any independent science to try to push the conclusions one way or the other. And the film focuses a bit more on the legal battles that are going on around those cases where people are dying from taser, and features a lot of the lawyers, which, quite honestly, if anything, it could give you a bit of insight into some lawyers that I consider almost like ambulance chasers, but now they're taser chasers. I really was not impressed with some of the lawyers that this showed. And it also showed the ugly side of Taser International in terms of it being a corporate entity. And I've worked in some big corporate entities, and they all operate pretty much the same. Plausible deniability, removing themselves, distancing themselves from any claims that they might be responsible for what's happening, not being able to comment openly. There's a lot of things that are built into our American corporate structure that are just ugly. And this film does highlight some of those, particularly within the Taser International organization. It is kind of interesting on a side note to see these two brothers that helped found this company, and they're interviewed. They show a few depositions with them, and their health just seems to be affected. These guys age extremely hard, and it looks like that job is extremely stressful. So I don't know that even despite that company making millions or possibly even billions at that point, I don't know if it's personally worth it just to you and your health and your life to take that on. But like I said, it still does come from a very important and good-natured cause of creating a police device that could help subdue someone without harming them and without harming the officer. And that's where it's a very complicated thing, because you now have instances, which are a very small percentage of instances, where this device might be triggering people to have heart attacks and essentially killing them. And it's weird, by the time I got to the end of this, despite all that, I kind of felt like, yeah, but it's still a good device in like 99% of those cases, so wouldn't you still want to use that? And just because some people are putting themselves into situations where they have to have law enforcement approach them and deal with them, and in some of the cases they showed, these people were getting unnecessarily aggressive. I don't know. I really, it's a very fuzzy line for me. As a matter of fact, after watching this, I was left with so many questions that I think I'm going to do just not a full brain scratch. I'll do a Johnny Vlogs next week, where I'm going to jump into a little more research on Taser, because I think I've got some ideas, and I'm not sure why they haven't developed them yet, that could make that device really, really safe and stop the possibility of them having people die from interacting with that device. Because it seems like the police need it in some way, but then that brings me back to my original point, like about Waze. Are the police needing this because now they've had a taste of it, and hey, it's really easy if someone isn't listening to us, we just pull out the taser and tase them because we know it's non-lethal, it's not going to kill them, takes them down immediately, we can cuff them within seconds. So if anything, there was a very interesting question raised in this documentary about, are police using that device properly? Because tasing someone once for 5 seconds, it appears, has a very, very low to almost no mortality rate. But in several of these cases, the police officers would tase these people multiple times for 5-second bursts, and that might be a bit of a different situation. So definitely raised some good questions, but like I said, not the most interesting documentary I've seen. If you are interested particularly in the backstory of Taser and potentially the future of Taser or where they could take it, I think that you will enjoy it. If you want to take a look at law enforcement from a bit of a different perspective, I really appreciated the input from some of the officers that were interviewed in this film. I think that you'll get something out of it. But for general consumption, I just didn't find it all that interesting. Quite honestly, I would rate this a 5 out of 10. On IMDB, it's rated a 6.6 out of 10, I think. But for some of you out there, if you're interested, like I said, in law enforcement and Taser, I think you'd want to check out killing them safely. It's definitely a piece of the conversation that we need to consider. But in terms of it being a piece of art or a documentary and being a complete thought, I didn't get that sense. It really felt like a bunch of information kind of thrown together, and there was no overarching narrative that the filmmaker was trying to convey to us. Even if he was trying to be unbiased, I don't feel like he really hit that quite right either. It's not biased, but it doesn't have a tone of hunting for the truth in it either. It's literally like taking the worst ends of both sides of those conversations and just showing it to you, instead of trying to find someone that might be open-minded. Like I mentioned, independent scientists, none of that really comes up in this documentary. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Like I said, available on Netflix in the US. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but also available on other digital platforms if you want to check out Killing Them Safely. Thank you so much for joining me on this Geek and Dorks review. I hope you're having a great week, and I will catch you on the next show on the Geek and Dorks channel. Take care.